You're listening to Under the Shell Podcast, the best in America.
Welcome to Under the Shell, presented by Testudo Times. I'm Brenna Weissel.
Sam Jane.
Michael Howes, and we got a lot to talk about in today's episode, including that Maryland-Michigan State game. But first, we're going to our interview. He's a couple seasons away, but he's going to be a headlining athlete in the spring. Our next guest is going to be one of the senior leaders for the Maryland baseball team this year. He led the team in hits last season, was first team All Big Ten. We are so happy to have on Eddie Hacopian. Eddie, thank you for coming on.
No problem. It's going to be fun.
So, back for your senior season now, kind of looking back on the past 2 years at Maryland, what are you most proud of and kind of what are you looking forward to this season?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I'm proud of. Obviously, winning the Big Ten my first year here and winning that tournament was a lot of fun. That's probably what I'm most proud of, but a lot of the individual accolades are cool too, and it's really cool, like with my story and just being able to produce here and try and leave a legacy here. That's something I'm excited about. I'm really excited to get going with these new guys. I think we got a really good squad this year, and I'm excited to go show people what we got.
Obviously this past summer there was some optimism that you could be drafted. Draft didn't go your way, but kind of what did you learn from that experience the past summer prepping for it? And then I assume that's given you fuel to come back even better this season, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, draft didn't go my way, but I mean, I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, and just being back here with the guys, the coaches, everything. It kind of was a blessing in disguise. Like I feel great being here. I'm happy, having a lot of fun, and I think this squad's really got something to it, and I really think this could be a big winner this year.
Eddie, I didn't know you have a brother on the team. Is that something that's well known? I'm being sarcastic, but take me a little bit through that draft day, because the MLB draft, for people who don't know, is not like any other professional sports league draft. There are 175 or 2 million rounds, depending on how many players teams want to pick. So it's not like you're in a green room or anything, right? It's just kind of take me through the emotions of, for you, I'm assuming waiting until the later rounds to maybe hear your name called. What's the process like there, and what were the emotions?
Yeah, those 2 days, day 2 and day 3, were some of the weirdest days of my life. Like I remember I went up to work out before day 2, and we were feeling better about day 2 than day 3, and I'm coming back driving my car, and I get a call from a team, and they're like, "Hey, would you sign?" I'm like, "Yeah, for sure. Like, I'd sign." And it just felt like it was all gonna go right, and I remember just sitting there, just waiting, looking for my phone, seeing all these guys get drafted, and didn't go my way. And then day 3 comes, and same thing, kind of just a roller coaster of emotions, and didn't get any calls on day 3, and now we're back here.
So a team would call you, ask you like, "Oh, are you going to sign, or are you going to go back to school?" And then you told them like, "Oh, like I'll play in the majors," like, because I know there's like overslot and underslot, right? Like,
yeah. So day 2 is very interesting because it's a lot of the 6 through 10 is very underslot. It's like underslot rounds. So they'll go for older guys, and they'll pay them underslot so they can sign like high schoolers later, or whoever they want to give more money to later. So it's kind of like those seniors and those older kids really get picked 6 through 10, and then 10 through 20 depends on the team, but it more of a lottery pick.
Obviously the draft didn't go your way. A lot of your baseball journey didn't really go the way that you wanted it to. No D1 offers coming out of high school. Had to go to California, play JUCO at Cypress College. Is there any parallels to that, kind of like the mindset of not having it go your way and just kind of having to regroup and, kind of power through it?
Yeah, 100%. This is nothing new for me. I remember after it was all done, my mom was telling me, she was telling me, like, your back's always up against the wall. This always happens to you, but you always go through. You always come through. And that helped a lot. Like, a lot of the support from my family and my friends and texts I got really helped me through it. And I mean, I'm just so ready to come out here on my last year and just show them. Show 'em.
For the people who don't know listening, when you went to Cyprus, you couldn't even play your first year really because of the broken wrist, right?
Mhm.
Kind of take us through that whole time period for you when you were in California going through that.
Yeah, I went in there 2020 to 2021, so it's big COVID. I went in there in the fall. It was like we had practice like 3-4 times a week because California was big on COVID and they had all these wildfires too. So like we like couldn't really be outside. So it was like a weird fall. I was there for a month and then I came back and I was feeling pretty good. I was probably behind in the depth chart. There was probably a kid playing over me at second, and my like second week out there back in the spring, uh, broke my hand, broke my hamate bone, got surgery, was trying to come back, and honestly, it's a blessing that I didn't come back because then I wouldn't have this year back. So I redshirted, and then in the fall, I went back my next year and wasn't getting many opportunities in the fall. And then I had a really good fall World Series game, my last game. So that was kind of a good segue to go in my fall exit meeting and go back home with something positive. And I honestly came back in the spring and I was like a whole different player. Like I was stronger, I was faster, I was just hitting really well. And I remember like right when I came back, I hit like a home run, double in the inner squads. So they gave me the start, first game of the year, and I went like 1 for 2 with an error at second. It was like an infield single, and then I got benched for like 8 games. And I remember there was a moment during practice. I was like, it was like my 5th game, and I was like, you know what? Like, I got nothing to lose now. I got nothing to lose. I'm just gonna play my game. I'm just gonna outwork everyone. And I got one spot start against a lefty at Mount Sac, and I went 3 for 4, and then that was a 26-game hit streak. After that, it was never not play again. It was got an offer from Maryland and took it, and that's kind of how it was. It was so quick.
I believe the story is your dad came up for that series or that weekend, right?
Yeah,
When you
he
got that.
did. Yeah, he came up. The way it worked is we played Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, and he came up that week. Didn't play Tuesday, and then I played Thursday, and that was it. 3 for 4, and then 3 for 6 with a home run when he was up there.
You guys obviously are a big Terp family. For people who don't know, Derek, Eddie's dad, played at Maryland. Chris's brother is starring there. So probably not a lot of Penn State gear or Virginia or any of that laying around the Hacopian house. But one of the interesting details I read kind of, about you and your life was your dad didn't think you were good enough to play D1 baseball at first. It said like you were he wanted to see you grow into yourself and that type of thing. For a kid who grows up around a dad who is so successful and has a brother who's so successful, I'm not asking you to say like there's competition because I know we've talked before. It's not that way. But is there almost a pressure to kind of live up to like, and I want to be a good baseball player like in the family, or is it just kind of ingrained in you to play baseball from a young age? I just want to know from someone who has that sort of family background.
Yeah, I mean it's a super interesting dynamic because when I look back at it, when I was 14, 15, 16, like I was nothing. I was not a good baseball player, a small little scrawny kid. Couldn't really I had no balance, couldn't really swing the bat, and I don't know why, but there was just always this belief in my head that it was going to work out. I was going to get better. And like honestly, like looking at it from a broad perspective and people outside my body and my brain, everyone would be like, "You're crazy. you're crazy. Like this guy'd be lucky to play college baseball. And my dad always told me like I had the talent, but I got to work for it, and I was really immature in those years, and I didn't work for it. And Chris was a guy that just had a great work ethic, didn't really need much to matured earlier. And I definitely matured later, and I kind of figured it out at the end. And I wouldn't say there was a big pressure because I know my family, like regardless if I played baseball or not, would be there for me and love me. And but there was always a pressure in me. Like I wanted it. I wanted to be a great baseball player like my dad, like my brother. Honestly, like I'm very proud that it turned out this way. But there's still a lot more to prove.
How do you kind of like, as you're growing up and as you're getting older, like, is there any sort of, frustration, I guess? Not frustration, but I assume people like us, the media, friends, family are constantly asking you about your brother and your dad and stuff. And like, it's a running joke amongst, people who follow Maryland baseball, at least me and Mike, that like, oh my gosh, did you know there's two brothers on the baseball team? Because that's all anybody talks about. Same with Sam Honar and playing the guitar. How do you kind of like, does that ever get frustrating to have to constantly hear questions about that where you're just kind of like, man, let me do my thing? Or do you enjoy that? I just want to know from a player's point of view.
No, not really. Doesn't get frustrating for me. Like, I feel like me and my brother have just such a good relationship with everything. And like if he tells me something like that I'm doing, then I will be receptive and I'll listen to him. And if I tell him something he's doing, he'll be receptive and he'll listen. So there's not really any like power hierarchy between us. Like I think it's cool. Like it's cool that we play on the same team. It's cool that we're both really good players on the same team, and it's something that my family's proud of. And there's nothing but love there.
I want to take it back to Cyprus for a second, because you mentioned you got that offer from Maryland, but I know Maryland wasn't the first school that contacted you. I believe it was Coastal Carolina. Um, how hard was it to be patient and not take that first offer that you immediately got after you worked so hard the past 2 years to finally get that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it was like my first shiny offer. So yeah, it was hard. It was hard. I'm not gonna lie, but my dad was like, "Wait, we might have Maryland. We might have Maryland." And Maryland was always a school I really wanted to go to. So I was like, "All right, I'll be patient." And it just happened. Like I was on the bus. I just had a really good game. We had a tournament in San Luis Obispo, and I was at like a Carl's Jr. in the middle of Northern California. And I get a phone call from Swope, and he's like, "We got you. We'll give you a spot." And I committed. I committed then, and my coach in junior college, I'm like sitting in the back. He texts me. He's like, "Did you just commit to Maryland?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And he got on the loudspeaker, and that was kind of a really surreal moment for me. And I was like, "Wow, I really did it."
Why do you, as we move kind of, I mean, for you to come to Maryland and then become a leader, I know you were an integral part of last year's team, but you guys had high expectations and kind of fell short. What do you think were the biggest reasons or biggest elements for why last year's team disappointed?
There's a bunch of stuff, but just we just didn't get timely hits. We didn't pitch great, and it was kind of just a combination of both. Like we just didn't get the job done, and we started hot, and then we kind of faltered. But sometimes it just happens in baseball,
Yeah. And do you think that what do you think will be the biggest, because I know you guys have a lot of roster turnover this year. Mike's talked about it in Swope in his second season. Did you kind of see him growing more comfortable as the year went on? And what do you kind of expect from this year's team as we look toward the baseball season, which is far away, but you guys have a winter and all that. So
yeah, Swope's great. Swope's awesome. He's my guy. Yeah, he's growing every day, getting better as a coach, and I'm just so happy to be able to play for him, and I know the other guys are so happy to be able to play for him, and I'm really expecting a pretty pretty big year out of us this year. I know there's a lot of guys getting older. There's a bunch of guys that we had last year coming back, and those guys are ready to have big years. Like I see it. I see so many guys working hard, and I see so many guys improving, and we're getting older, and got some good transfers. So I'm really excited for this squad this year.
A lot of additions through the transfer portal, a lot of freshmen coming in as well. Is there any newcomers that have kind of stood out to you so far?
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys. It's hard to just single out one. Every guy like is so focused on winning here, and that's what we do at Maryland. We win, and like name them. Every single guy has impressed me.
And then kind of taking it back to your first year at Maryland, a lot of guys that were on that roster too, Matt Shaw, Nick LaRusso, Luke Schliger. What was that like for you, immediately getting on the team to be surrounded with guys like that?
Yeah, I mean, you just learn so much from being around great players like that, like Shaw, Shig, LaRusso, like those guys. Like it will just give you so much information and just stuff to take with you, and you just learn. Like you learn so much through it all.
Eddie,
And Kevin Keister. I don't want to leave out Kev Keister too. Love that guy.
Eddie, I got a quick game for you. So I'm going to take you through a couple hypotheticals for the upcoming year. This isn't even related all to your team, but then I want you to give me a % chance that happens. Okay, so I'm going to give you like a hypothetical situation, and you tell me what you're thinking in terms of likelihood. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Matt Swope gets 2 or more ejections. Last year, what was it, Mike? 2? We did a preseason. I set the line at 1.5 and the over hit. So what are the people looking for here?
I'm gonna go less because I think he's gonna have less to be angry about this year. When we're up more, we're winning games. Doesn't need to get ejected. So
fair enough. Who would be a more fiery coach, I guess, in an eject? Is it Vaughn or Swope? Who's the more kind of stamp the plate, go all out?
I don't know. That's a great question because you see Vaughn get into it a little bit. I've seen Swope get into it a little bit, but I don't know. It kind of just depends on the moment.
All right. % chance that Matt Shaw is on the Cubs opening day roster and is starting on opening day
next year. 100.
Oh, okay.
100%.
He's been killing it in the minors.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. % chance that you guys have 5 hitters finish above 300. Last year it was 3. You're adding some guys taking some steps. That's a big number, though. What do you think?
I'm gonna go 100. I believe in my guys.
Okay.
I love those dudes.
So would it be? I know we're not going to shoehorn you in, but the likely candidates would probably be what? You, Chris, Braden Martin, Mike. Help me out here. Who am I missing?
Hollis Porter, big addition through the portal.
Any other guys, Eddie?
Elijah Lambros.
Oh, Lambros. That's right.
Bunch of guys. Love those guys.
That leads into my next question. What's the chances Elijah Lambros robs another homer?
100.
Okay. Eddie likes the 100. I like it.
I've seen it. I've seen it too much. He goes up there, he gets them every single time.
Okay. I know that I read that you're a big fisher. You like to fish. So what's the chances that you're catching at least, oh boy, what's the largest fish you've caught? Do you ever go in the off season and stuff?
I'm a big sneak onto golf course ponds because they stock them really well with a largemouth bass. So I do that. I actually reeled a big one in this summer. I snuck onto this golf course and I was freaking out. I was looking over my shoulder and making sure no one was coming to get me. And I got the biggest largemouth bass I've ever caught. I think it was 3.5, 4 pounds. It was a big one. Yeah.
So I guess the question should be chances Eddie Hacopian gets kicked off a golf course.
Yeah, it's gonna come one of these days.
And 2 more for you. What do you think is the likelihood, that when we look back at around this time next year, that you guys are in Omaha? I know the Big Ten Conference is tough. You guys made some additions. I'm not asking you necessarily to give a percent, but tell me, why do you think that would happen? And then also, why do you think it wouldn't happen? I guess what would have to swing way either way?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really positive going in with this team, and I think I see it. I see it. Yeah, I think it's gonna happen. I can feel it. I love the guys we have in here. I love the hitters. I love the pitchers. I love our coaches, and I think we have really good leadership this year. And we just got a lot of guys that can swing it. And we got a lot of guys that are gonna be able to pitch. Like Kyle McCoy coming back is big for us. Joey coming back. Got some freshmen that can pitch. Got some transfers that can pitch. I'm really excited to see how this team plays, and I'm really excited to go have a big year and help.
Yeah.
I just think it's just too deep this year.
Yeah. And then last one for you. What's the chances that you and Chris go back to back this season?
So that would mean we're hitting 1, 2, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
We didn't go back to back last year.
I don't think so, Mike.
I don't think we did. I like it. I like the odds. It's got to happen. It's gonna happen. I'll go 100 again. 100.
And then last question, your favorite cardiac Terps moment, because there's been a lot, especially last season. Then you have, what was it? It was the Big Ten game against Nebraska, LaRusso, and extras. What's your favorite moment?
There's so many. We've had a lot. LaRusso's was great. LaRusso's was really good. I had one against Michigan that I really liked, too. Sam had one against UMBC that was big. Braden had those 2 against Michigan State. I'm going to go with LaRusso. LaRusso, that home run can't be topped. It was just such a cool moment to beat Nebraska with all those fans after a rain delay. That was the coolest moment I've been a part of.
All right, Eddie. Well, we really appreciate your time, man. Obviously, baseball season is a little bit away, but I think Maryland fans and Terp baseball fans are really excited to see the team you guys put out there, and excited to see you and Chris kind of continue to terrorize the Big Ten. Tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter, Instagram, all that type of thing.
Yeah, Eddie Hacopian, both Twitter and Instagram.
Super complicated guy. So, Eddie, we really appreciate it, man, and thanks a lot. What's the World Champion shirt you got on there? Who are we looking?
It's a little Snoopy shirt I got at Target yesterday. $7.
There you go. Snoopy and the Hacopians, both known baseball players. So thanks a lot, Eddie. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
Well, it was great to talk about something other than football, but you knew we were going to discuss it. Before we talk about the bad news in football, the Patriots won, the Lions won, and the Seahawks won. So that was a big positive for the three of us. But now we got to talk Maryland football. Guys, what the hell happened?
It took us a while to respond because that's kind of, I think, the reaction of every Maryland fan. I don't think anybody knows. A home loss to Michigan State in the game where Maryland was a touchdown favorite. I think yet again, Maryland has, it feels like, guys, we've seen this game since we've arrived in school, right? Like, it's been now 3 straight years where Maryland's lost a home conference game as a favorite to a middling Big Ten team. Purdue in 2022, Illinois in 2023, and now Michigan State in 2024. And each game has had the same element. I mean, I know, Mike, you said to me afterwards, it felt like Illinois all over again. Stupid penalties, costly mistakes, an inability to run the football, and a secondary that, guys, I mean, that was atrocious. There's nothing else to say. I mean, an 18-year-old quarterback, Aiden Childs, who is talented. I really like him, was a top 60 guy out of high school. He's also 18 years old and threw for 114 yards in week 1. Like, let's not act like this guy's the second coming of Patrick Mahomes, okay? The lack of discipline in the secondary to allow 77-yard touchdown pass, a 37-yard touchdown pass, an inability to cover another freshman, Nick Marsh, wide receiver for Michigan State, was flabbergasting. And I just think that this team, to kill any sort of season momentum you've had before you've even entered, October, when the weather's below 60 degrees, it's a very, very large stain on Mike Loxley's time here. And I'm not trying to overreact to one loss. I understand it's early in the season. I understand, this is a transition year if people want to call it that. But at the end of the day, there is no excuse for what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, just an absolutely disappointing performance from the Terps who coming into this, we were talking about them going 6-0 to start the season. Now they're 1-1, 2 weeks in. People questioning the program, who's at the head of the program, and you mentioned the secondary. This was the first game since 2009 where the Terps had 3 interceptions, which is surprising since we talk about these secondary issues. But since they had 3 picks and they still lost the game, and then, we talked about this being a similar game that we've seen for the past, this is now the third year we've been at Maryland. Afterwards, Loxley is saying the same type of things that he's been saying after these losses that they should not be losing, how it's simple errors, they need to clean it up. You start to ask, how much longer do they need to clean up these mistakes? This is year 6 for Coach Loxley. He cannot be going back on the same excuses after this kind of loss every single season.
I agree, Mike. It's absolutely unbelievable. I think the biggest issue, the secondary was pretty bad. Glendon Miller, who we talked about on the podcast last week, had 2 interceptions, but overall, his actual coverage stats, I know Sammy looked into that, they weren't incredible either. The biggest issue for me was the offense. I want to break down when they scored points, right? They scored on the first drive of the game. They got a nice touchdown. That's a scripted drive, right? So, fine, scripted drive. Then they scored a touchdown, but it was off an interception, so they had a short field. That's how they got their 14 points. They didn't score again until 8 minutes to go in the third quarter. That was their first drive of the second half, also a scripted drive. So that's right, or they got a field goal in their first drive of the second half, also pretty much scripted. So that's 17 of their 24 points. And they put one drive together in the fourth quarter, and at that point, it looked like they were going to win the game. And so my point is that most of their offense was bad because they had a chance to set it up, and when they had to actually make plays, when they had to get 1 first down, when they had to get 3 yards, they couldn't do it. And the run game that looked very strong against UConn was awful. If you can't rely on your offense to get 1 yard to win the game, then what's the point? Just a tough watch, honestly.
Yeah, and Brendan, I think you're speaking incredibly well in terms of the offense's inability to put together drives. And I want to even push back a little on the run game being strong. They had a couple of nice runs against UConn. Yes, Nolan Ray's big touchdown run was big. And I think I even mentioned last week that I thought the running game struggled in reality because they weren't popping off, consistent 6-7 yard runs against a team that, let's be honest, is terrible. So then you go and play Michigan State, who has a good run defense, right? That's what they're known for. That's the strength of the Spartans. But Nolan Ray and Roman Hemby combined to run for 55 yards on 20 attempts. That is not good enough no matter who you're playing. And then that puts all the pressure on Billy Edwards, who I thought played actually pretty well, but that's not what this team is supposed to be, right? We talked about it before the season. Mike mentioned this entire offense is predicated among running the football and then using play action in the QB run in order to open up holes. It's really fallen back into, in that game, to the typical Maryland under Talia, where they're having to rely too much on a quarterback's arm, who eventually will make a mistake, Edwards with the fourth quarter turnover, and it falls apart. And Ty Felton and Billy Edwards both, I thought, played really well, but eventually, if you can't run the football and you keep giving up explosives through the air, you're going to lose the game. And that's not even to mention the coaching miscues. We can talk about specific decisions, but 3rd down and 1, 4th and 1, and you're not using a player whose entire job last season was those situations. QB sneaks with Billy Edwards. That was what he did. He scored, I think, 7 touchdowns last year, was Maryland's leading touchdown scorer. And now you're choosing not to use him in those situations. It makes no sense to me. You would then rely on the kicking the field goal versus going for it. To me, I've always been on the side of play aggressively. And Loxley had, as much as I disagreed with it, he has a fair point that going up 2 possessions would have been big there. But going up 2 possessions relies on a kicker who doesn't make those type of field goals usually. Jack Howes on his career is under 60% between field goals of 40 and 50 yards.
So it's not like, oh, let's go up two possessions. This is a guarantee, like a 27-yard field goal. This was a 42-yard field goal that it was up in the air if he was going to make it. So you choose to then trot out a kicker who struggled versus using your best offensive weapon at points last season in a situation that was perfect for him. And then to not go for it on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 later in the game when you're at the 45, I get wanting to give the ball back, but instead you choose to punt it away and Michigan State goes on a game-winning drive. So it is a situation, as Locksley says, of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But if you're getting paid as much money as Mike Locksley is, and I think Mike Locksley is a good coach, okay? I think he's proven that he can win at the FBS level. But when you're getting paid as much money as he is, and the consistent results happen in these games and these losses, you are bound to face criticism. And I think Mike mentioned it, I think you mentioned it, that the continuous excuses that this program has used over and over again when they lose these type of games, it's getting old.
We need to stop worrying if they can win the big game. They just got to win these types of games first. The Northwesterns, the Illinois, the Michigan States, the Purdue's, they got to win these types of games. That being said, I still do think Loxley's seat is still comfortably cold right now. There is not too much pressure on him where his job security is at risk at the end of this season. When you look at the class he's got coming in next year, including one of the highest incoming quarterbacks the program has ever seen, I think he still has a little bit of leeway to go before that seat starts getting a little warm.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Like, if Maryland had won all the games that they were supposed to win this year, then it doesn't really matter, right? You know, you can't really expect them to beat USC and beat Oregon. But they just lost to Michigan State in week 2. And Mike, that's, you know, it's unbelievable. And going back to what Sam was saying, the game really did come down to kicking. And I didn't know the exact numbers on Jack Howes, but hey, you got to think, if Loxley's thinking about it, he already made his 40 to 50-yard field goal in that game. He made a 45-yarder in the third quarter. He should know he's probably really 60%. Yeah, he's probably only good for one of those in a game. So what the hell is he doing, allowing him to kick a second one? And not going to Billy Edwards to get 1 yard is unbelievable. And you know, the other thing that's ridiculous is at the end of the first half, Michigan State kicked a field goal as time expired, missed the first field goal, and then penalty on Maryland and makes second field goal. That's the difference in the game right there. I mean, just the kicking and those two special teams issues right there is exactly why Maryland loses. And it's a tough one to swallow. For the rest of the season, like, the thing that I've been thinking a lot about is in past years, last year, for example, Maryland loses to Illinois. And that game, a game they should have won. It was a homecoming game, brutal loss. And you said it earlier, Mike, it feels pretty similar. But they still had Michigan on their schedule. They still had a chance to have the biggest win in the program in the last 25 years. But they don't really have that this year. Like, yeah, if Maryland somehow beats Oregon on the road, but Maryland doesn't care about beating Oregon. They never play this team. It's if Maryland beats Michigan or Ohio State, like, those are big games, or at least they have been because of the schedule. But, you know, like, it just, you look at the rest of the schedule and it's just disheartening. What are your thoughts on the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think that you both have fair points. I think Mike is right in saying that Loxley's job is not on the line because it's been proven that I think Maryland's comfortable going 7-5, 8-4, and they're at that point where, you know, they're not going to fire Mike Loxley over one game, nor should they. I don't think that one loss, as frustrating as it is, deserves him to lose his job or to even be put on the hot seat. But I also think Brendan's right in that this now opens up the potential for a landslide of a season, right? Now, it depends on how they respond, but I mean, say they lose to Virginia on Saturday, which is entirely possible. Virginia's not a good football team, but they could lose. I don't think Michigan State is either. Then you start 1-2 and you start looking at the rest of the schedule, and those games that we talked about in the preseason as kind of being like, oh, well, they're toss-ups, they start to look more and more like losses. And so, you know, I don't want to overreact to one game. That's kind of our job. But I think that as a whole, the rest of the year, it really just comes down to how this team responds. I like Dante Trader saying that, you know, it won't happen again, all that type of things. I think Dante's and the players are pretty intent on making sure that, you know, those secondary issues don't happen. But at the end of the day, you have to put together and string together some performances. And I don't even know if Maryland fans are going to feel good about anything they do until the Oregon game, right? Maybe Minnesota, if they win that, and you know, that's a road win, you know, feeling some momentum, or USC if they're able to win that game. But I mean, beating Virginia, Indiana, and Villanova over the next couple weeks, in my opinion, won't do anything to assure any confidence. So I think they just have to get back, back on the horse, back on the wagon, as the cliches go, and find a way to string together some wins before a USC game that, guys, let's face it now, to kind of offset like the loss you just had, you might need to upset a team. And that's the other thing. If Maryland was losing these games and then they pulled off a win against a Penn State or a Michigan or Ohio State, like Brendan was saying, I think that the program would be given a lot more leeway, right? But they're losing the games they're supposed to lose. I don't think Loxley's won a Big Ten game as an underdog and of substantial margin in his entire tenure, and yet they're still losing games that they shouldn't. So it's that balance and yin and yang that I think that they really haven't achieved yet. That I think this season there's a chance to maybe offset that, but it'll be really interesting to watch over these next couple weeks, that's for sure.
I said it last year, and I've always said it. Good teams win football games. I'm not sure how much you guys checked out the rest of the college football slate. I was pretty focused on the Maryland, but I have an app and I can check the scores. And Penn State played a pretty close game against Bowling Green, but they won the game, so who cares, right? Oregon played a pretty close game against Boise State, but they won the game. And so it's teams are going to play close games. It's conference football. Teams want to go at each other's throats, but it doesn't really matter unless you win the game. And time again, Maryland has just not won those games. And so it's just, like you said, they could still be 5-1 going to the USC game. And then at that point, I guess you reevaluate a little bit, and the team is kind of what we thought it was. But until then, and the next 4 games are going to say a lot about this team.
Yeah, and now looking forward to this upcoming weekend at Virginia, Saturday night. This was a game, when you look at the schedule preseason, you're like, oh, this is going to be an easy Maryland win. They won 42 of the 14 last year. That is not the case when you check the sports books this morning. As of Monday, Maryland is only 2.5-point favorites at Virginia. That being said, how do you guys think that the game will go?
If you'd asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer, but I think Maryland wins this game. They have to respond. And Maryland, talent-wise, is a much better football team than Virginia. Virginia's had a pretty decent start, won an ACC game last weekend, but, I think Maryland is going to bounce back, and I actually do think the running attack will look much better against the Virginia defense.
Yeah, I'm kind of in between. I think that they'll probably win. I think that when you look at Virginia, obviously, a program that's kind of in the same spot. I mean, I know they're 2-0. They managed to beat Wake Forest in a game. That's not necessarily saying much, but still 2-0. I think they've got a couple really nice pieces. I like Kobe Pace, their running back. Malachi Fields is a really nice receiver. He's picked up 248 yards on the year. And I just think that Maryland will find a way to get this one done. I think Billy Edwards, hope, just for Maryland fans' sake, that he's more involved in the QB run game. But I would give the Terps a pretty narrow win, and maybe a bounce back, but I would not be surprised to see them lose this game either. Entirely possible. A night game on the road, we'll see. I wish I was going, but mazel tov to my little brother, so I will be heading to a different spot. Should be a fun one to watch, and will be interesting to see how they respond and kind of where they go from there. Football took a tough loss. We just spent a lot of time talking about it, but in kind of a reversal of these past couple weeks, guys, the other sports performed relatively well. Men's soccer with a big win over Brown. Brendan, got a tough game coming up, couple of games, but talk to me a little bit about the Brown win.
Yeah, I was actually covering that game, which doesn't always happen, but it happened to happen. Solid win for Maryland. Honestly, it looked for a while there like that game was gonna be a win, and then Brown tied it up in 70th minute, and then Max Rogers on a free kick had a great goal, and hopefully they'll start to get some momentum for Maryland. But San Diego State on Monday night, that'll happen way after this episode will be released way after that. The big game is Wisconsin on Friday night. Wisconsin is the 10th best team in the country, at least that's their ranking as of right now. They're coming off a win against Kentucky, who's also ranked. Wisconsin's third highest team ranked in the Big Ten. So it's going to be a tough game, and honestly, I would not expect it to be pretty. I would expect Maryland to lose by 2 or 3 goals. I just think Maryland doesn't have the offensive power against the Wisconsin defense to score. So I would not expect it to be that pretty on the men's side. And then going over to the women's side of soccer, they had a strong win yesterday. 4 goals. Yeah, 4 goals for Maryland. You heard that right. Against VCU. VCU is not good. For some odd reason that I couldn't quite figure out, it was the senior day. Maybe they wanted it to be a win. I don't know. It's a senior day on September 9th. Doesn't really, it's kind of an oxymoron. Whatever. They're 3-2-3 going into Big Ten play. Last year, their final win of the season came on September 10th. This year, it could come on September 8th, which was the VCU game. The first Big Ten game is against Michigan State, 5th best team in the country. They've been outscored 12-1 last 4 games. Michigan State's won back-to-back Big Ten championships. Maryland is not winning this game. This would be bigger than the Notre Dame Northern Illinois upset, honestly. Maryland will lose this game. So they'll have to probably refocus after this and then go forward to Big Ten play. The biggest question, obviously, right now is can they win a game in Big Ten play? And if I had to put money on it right now, I would say no.
Yeah, I think that you got some bright spots. Obviously, Kennedy Bell with a couple of goals against VCU. She continues to play well after a strong year last year, but just not enough depth and talent, I would imagine, to compete with the top teams in the Big Ten. And so I would expect a couple losses here for the women's soccer team that does necessarily have the depth and talent to compete with probably the nation, but didn't do that in a tough loss. The field hockey team, first loss of their season was against number 5, Duke on Sunday. Kind of an interesting game. I actually watched the highlights a little bit. Obviously a defensive battle, 1-0, a tough game for the Terps, whose offense is usually has been kind of their strength. But it was weird, Brendan, in that Duke only got 3 shots on goal, and yet they were able to kind of keep the win there at the end. But I thought that for Maryland, it's not necessarily the worst thing. Duke has a really good defense, top 10 in the country, but it's obviously a frustrating loss for Maryland.
Yeah, usually when you see a team get only 3 attempts the entire game, you're like, oh, okay, so that was a pretty easy win for the other team. But no, Maryland's case, they lost 1-0. Maryland only managed 1 shot attempt themselves in that final period. So kind of offensive struggle for both sides, and it's going to be a tough road ahead for Maryland. They again have a stacked schedule like I've been talking about. 8 of the remaining 13 teams on their slate are ranked. So Missy Maharg's squad's kind of got to regroup quickly going into this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Evanston is just a house of horrors at this point for Maryland. They can't win there. They played it because of the Big Ten ACC Cup Challenge, but I think Maryland is probably like, enough of this rundown Chicago college town. We need to come back to the Superior Journalism School in College Park. That's what it feels like, at least from our perspectives, of course. But yeah, the field hockey team kind of obviously going to have to keep going through the tough grind of the schedule that they seem to always play. Volleyball does not play that tough schedule, albeit they went 3-0 this week. Brendan, take us quick through Adam Hughes' team.
Yeah, just a quick note on field hockey. The Big Ten championships will be in College Park this year, so won't have to go to Northwestern, which probably will help out Maryland, but that's a ways away. Volleyball, like you said, Sam, 3-0 weekend. Competition, honestly, not that strong. And I said last week, if Maryland can get a 3-0 weekend, they can bounce back from there. Not great 1-2 start in the LSU tournament. 3 games coming up in the next week. They have Lehigh on Friday, UMBC on Sunday, and then Delaware State next Wednesday. I would expect them to beat Lehigh and Delaware State. And UMBC has been good historically, or at least good last year. Not so great to start the year. They are 0-6, so it's a good chance Maryland racks up 3 more non-conference wins. And the following week, they'll have 2 more non-conference games, and then it's on to Big Ten play, which will take us all the way pretty much to the start of December. So a lot more volleyball to be played, and we'll talk about that more as the fall goes on.
And then there was some commitment news for the Terps recently. Maryland basketball landed its first recruit for next season, 4-star power forward Marcus Jackson. He visited Maryland the past weekend, number 150th ranked prospect in next year's class nationally, and he's coming back to his home state of Maryland. Baltimore native, going to be playing alongside fellow Baltimore native Derek Queen if he doesn't go one and done. They also had 4-star small forward Jordan Scott visit this weekend. He's number 65 nationally from Virginia, another local guy. It seems that Scott's gotten down to Maryland, Virginia Tech, or Michigan State.
Quick note on Jordan Scott, Christy Winter Scott's kid, who obviously Maryland legend, so that probably gives the Terps a little bit of a leg up. But Jordan Scott, man, I love his game. He is a bucket, and they need more of those. So that'd be a pickup.
Even quicker note on basketball recruiting. Last year, Willard didn't have a recruit until it was the next year. So getting a recruit in September is that's a positive for Willard, I will say.
Yeah, he's out on the recruiting trail, and I like it. Kevin Willard, rejuvenated after last year's dismal season. It might be a dismal season for Brendan in the betting picks as well. You're catching strays, but I'm sorry, my friend. I saw the picks this week, and I wasn't a fan. So
I think this week or something. I think I went 2-1 last week.
Last week, but
Blind
Squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So B, you get to lead us off this week.
True. I think I said this last week. I don't like any of these picks either, but you got to pick 3, whatever. I'll start us off with Missouri minus 16 against Boston College. Boston College already won a road game against the top 10 team. The odds they do it again or even play close are really low, and Missouri is much better than Florida State. Florida State's pretty clearly not that good. Next game, Sam shared a bit of family news. My sister now goes to Georgia State for grad school, so thought I'd shout her out and give her a pick. So I'll take Georgia State plus 9.5 against Vanderbilt. Honestly, that pick is awful. I don't know why, but I'll stay true. And then I'll take Arkansas minus 20.5 against UAB. Their offense was awesome last week. They just couldn't get it done, and they're going to put up a bunch on UAB.
I'll take the next round, Brendan. First, want to give Kim credit. He actually predicted the Maryland spread against Michigan State was too high. So luckily, none of us picked that game. But I'm going to be sticking away from the Big Ten and going to SEC. And, well, I keep blanking because my first pick's Washington minus 4. That is a Big Ten opponent now. I'll take the Huskies to cover there. Then I got LSU minus 7.5 against South Carolina. I think LSU is actually a pretty good team. I think they're getting kind of undersold because of that loss in week 1. And then I'm going to take a team that we talked about earlier in this episode, weirdly, Wake Forest. I'll take Ole Miss to cover against them 23.5. I think Wake Forest is terrible and Ole Miss is good. So give me that spread. Give me that line.
And I'll finish it off this week. It's been a rough year for me so far, 2-4 on the picks, but we're going to be getting lucky this week. We got Maryland favorites by 2.5 points at Virginia. I think that Maryland should be favored a little bit more. I think that's a slight overreaction to the past weekend. Notre Dame favorites by 11.5 points at Purdue. I think Notre Dame is going to rebound from that upset loss the past weekend. And then to round it up, Colorado favorites by 7.5 points at Colorado State. This is a game that Colorado won last year. Colorado got absolutely smacked last week by Nebraska. Coach Prime's going to get his boys back motivated, back on the field, and back winning football games this week.
No way. Awful. Really bad pick, Mike.
Mike is picking the 3 biggest losers of the college football week.
He picked Maryland. Oh my God.
Colorado. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Yeah, Colorado should probably be about +5 against Colorado State. Did you watch the game against Nebraska, Mike?
I did. I was watching it, and I had my hands in my face the entire time.
Oh my
Like
God.
I said, bust out my AP. Perfect timing. And they can't play the fight song over there in Boulder, so we need to start playing recordings of Terrific Terp because it would be a more pleasing sound than Shador Sanders'
Well
song.
said. Well said.
Brendan, take it away.
All right. Well, I decided to take some of the focus off football and crown a field hockey standout for this week's Terrific Terp. Kelly Smith Puzo grew up in Pennsylvania, but decided to come to Maryland and join the historic field hockey program. She came to College Park in 1997, and in her junior year, in 1999, she helped lead the Terps to an NCAA championship. Puzo herself earned some honors, being named to 3 All-ACC teams and also won 3 ACC championships. Puzo was still playing field hockey at the highest level more than 10 years after she left College Park. That's because she represented the United States at the 2008 and 2012 Summer Olympic Games, impressively having 2 kids in between those years in 2010 and 2011. She was a member of Team USA for over 10 years and played 173 games for the team. After Maryland and during her pro playing career, she served as a coach at some colleges in the DMV area. And from 2012 to 2016, she served as an assistant coach at Miami, Ohio, where her husband is in fact still the head coach. Puzo is the founder of a club field hockey team called Field Hockey Life in Ohio. And this week's Terrific Terp has quite the field hockey family.
Now's in another amazing episode, capped off by an amazing, terrific Terp by Brendan. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We've got a TikTok now. We got a Facebook. You can find us anywhere. Stay tuned to the pod. Thank you, guys.
Guess what? You've got Under the Shell Podcast. Nobody does it better.